What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical average American here today to react and learn about the best parts of Montreal, Canada. And this exact video that I'm going to be watching is called Montreal Lives Up to the Hype, but isn't perfect. So I actually really liked that title because I do want to hear about the most hype parts of Montreal, and if it lives up to the hype, the best parts of it. But it also says, oh, it isn't perfect, so maybe we're going to acknowledge a couple of criticisms about Montreal. It's fine. We should all have some self-reflection, some criticisms of ourselves from time to time, unless you're like me, in which there's never any criticism you could ever pass about me, ever, anyone. Ever? Okay. Okay. I do not want to hear the answer to that. Nobody comment on that at all. You don't need to prove it. Don't demonstrate criticisms of me. I get it. I get it. Anyway. Anyway, gotta reel it back in. When Americans think about Montreal, it's one of the places that pops into our minds when we think of like, oh, what's a place in Canada? A lot of Americans would be able to say Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, and that's about it. That's all that pops into my mind, really. So, honestly, where is Montreal is the first thing. I didn't want to admit this, but Google will bail me out. I don't know where Montreal is. I admit it. I'm a fraud. No, that's kind of part of this, the fact that I don't know anything about Canada. That's the point. Wow, it's really close to the United States. As a matter of fact, if you were in Vermont, gosh, you could just drive there. And Ottawa, too. Wow. I never realized they were so close to the United States. I mean, a lot of these cities are very close to the U.S. Huh. I really never appreciated that fact. Oh, this, too, Quebec. Wait, Quebec is like a region. I think most Americans think Quebec is a city. I've been calling it a city. Sorry. Oh, there's Quebec City. It's kind of a city. Okay. Okay. Anyway, Montreal, very close to Ottawa, very close to the United States. Very interesting. I'm learning a lot, and I haven't even started the video. So let's take a look.
It's been almost a year since we moved from Montreal to Ottawa for job-related reasons. And while Ottawa has its charms too, we'd be lying if we said it was a case of not looking back.
Oh, I love this. The narrator has moved from Montreal to Ottawa, so he has something to compare it to, and he's looking back and comparing and like, oh, what were the things I loved about Montreal? I think that's great. I think this is a great way to look at it.
Living in Montreal had a really big impact on how we see cities, and it was basically the reason we started this channel. So in this video, we want to reflect on some of the reasons that we and lots of other people like Montreal so much.
Wow, sorry, but I had to stop this because I'm just looking at like the housing development here. There's a lot of houses that are connected to each other, unless these are apartments, houses, where there's no space in between. Very, very populous and tight together. Is that a theme in Montreal?
Of course, no place is perfect. So towards the end, we're going to talk about some of the downsides too.
Okay.
We are biased by the fact that we have a lifelong interest in French. We actually met each other at a French immersion program.
Wait, Montreal, is that a French-speaking part of Canada? That's pretty cool. I always wished I had learned another language. But America doesn't focus on that enough, sadly.
But the fact that there's a major North American city that speaks French as its primary language is fundamentally really cool.
Oh, it's primary language? I figured it was, like, equal to English or even secondary. I just figured. So, most people in Montreal speak French? Wow. Wow.
It's a mistake to treat the city or the province as an offshoot of France because of the shared language. But Montreal really is rooted in and connected to the French-speaking world in a lot of ways. This includes architectural influences, the collaboration with engineers from France on the Montreal Metro, and the disproportionate amount of immigration to Montreal from French-speaking places in Europe, Africa, and the Caribbean.
Well, I guess that makes sense. If you're from France or a French-speaking place and you want to move to Canada or North America, you should go to Montreal because they speak French. That just makes sense. And it is cool how there is French influence in the architecture here. That's really cool. I never thought of Montreal as some kind of offshoot of France. I've never thought of it like that at all. I've just thought there's French-speaking parts of Canada.
The fact that Montreal has French as its primary language isn't only a cool feature that makes the city more interesting. Living in a place where you have
What is this flag?
its primary language isn't only a
What's this flag here? Does Montreal have a flag? Montreal flag? Sorta. It's this one. This one. What is this? Huh. Google's not giving me a super clear answer here. No, that's not the same as that. Is it Quebec? Dang it, Montreal. Can't you just read my mind and answer my questions for me? What region is Montreal in? Where are you, Montreal? It's in Quebec. I think. It's hard to tell down here at this little border. Oh, I'm just gonna have to go with that. Oh, wait, I can just search flag of Quebec. Quebec. Flag. Yes. Yes, please. Yes, perfect. Got it. All right.
cool feature that makes the city more interesting. Living in a place where you have a constant opportunity to speak a second language is a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Your brain starts making connections in different ways, and the frequent code switching has you in a state of constant learning every day, especially if you make somewhat of an effort to use your second language on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Back
That is so cool. Speaking more than one language is like a superpower to me. It's like a superpower to me. It's so cool. It literally activates different parts of your brain. People say that when they speak another language, it brings out a different side of their personality, kind of. Anyway, onwards.
before car-centric development patterns took off, it was Montreal, not Toronto, that was Canada's biggest city, which gives Montreal a very solid foundation for urbanism.
So I think Montreal is currently the second biggest city in all of Canada, which is pretty amazing. And it used to be number one.
With older, dense, walkable neighborhoods gives Montreal a very solid foundation for urbanism, with older, dense, walkable neighborhoods making up most of the central city.
Yeah.
Rather than resting on this inheritance, Montreal today is also one of the most active and ambitious places in North America for pedestrian, cycling, and transit improvements.
Yeah, this is great. I love how this looks. It's very, like, lived in. It's like you can bike, you can walk around, there's a bunch of connected living spaces everywhere. It's cool. It's like, he's calling it kind of urban looking. It's very cool. It's like very much not the same feeling or vibe of a city that you get everywhere else. It's more like of a community feel almost.
Everywhere you look, there's an urbanist project reclaiming public space. From miscellaneous parklets to the 10 streets that were recently announced for pedestrianization for the next 3 years. Last year, we gave glowing reviews to Montreal's REV, or Express Bike Network, on Saint Denis. And this year, we were able to see the same concept of wide, comfortable, direct bike lanes also implemented on Peel Street.
Cool.
In so much of North America, you're considered a weirdo or a thrill-seeking show-off for biking to work. But in
I mean, a weirdo for biking to work? Maybe. People would just think you're a health freak, like obsessed with being healthy. I would be like, good for that guy. Biking to work? That's great. But some people would think it's weird, I guess. It's not common. I'll agree with that. It's not common in America.
Montreal's more bike-friendly neighborhoods, cycling is just a normal and natural way to get around.
That's great.
Finally, after a long period of stagnation in transit building, Montreal is literally doubling its rapid transit network, and more, with an automated metro system similar to the Vancouver SkyTrain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't live in a huge city, so America in general does not do well with public transportation. Everyone just owns a car, which is not good for the environment, you know. So it is cool that Montreal focuses on public transportation too.
To be clear, Montreal is still a North American city with sprawling suburbs, and car dependency baked into most of them, but even there you can find lots of features that stand out. Quebec has never been as afraid of apartments and multifamily homes as English North America, for example.
Huh.
Montreal is arguably the best city for urban exploration in Canada. Not only does it have a very different feel from cities in English North America due to the density and different architectural influences, its
Yeah.
neighborhoods feel very distinct from each other with their own look, feel, and local identity.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean, Montreal already has its own kind of look and feel, but then you have different neighborhoods and subsections in Montreal where it's like, yeah, I'm from this place. We have our own little look. That's cool.
Verdun, Griffintown,
Wait, Verdun?
look, feel, and local identity. Verdun,
Okay.
Griffintown,
Oh yeah.
NDG.
Oh, whoa. Sign me up for this place. I'm a sucker for a beautiful community baked in with the trees and all that. I'm a sucker for it. The combination of nature and human living.
Côte des Neiges,
Whoa.
Outremont,
Oh, this is beautiful. Yeah. Really big as well.
Parc X, Saint Leonard,
These places do all have completely different looks. My goodness, that's really cool.
Villeray. All of these places feel quite different.
Yeah.
There are lots of reasons for this. Montreal being an older city means that its neighborhoods span different development eras, and Montreal has a lot of dimensions of language variation. For example, Outremont is majority French with a big Yiddish-speaking minority, while Saint Leonard has a lot of trilingual Italian Canadians. Also, many
Oh.
parts of Montreal are independent cities, like Westmount, or were independent cities until 20 years ago, like
Wow, so the different parts of Montreal are really quite diverse and different from each other. It's like you're going to a whole different city within the city. Very interesting. Another thing about this is Montreal clearly has like a certain older school look to it. More lived in, as I said, more like brick buildings and stuff. It's cool. It's like real. Whereas I think American cities are obsessed with looking as modern as possible, tearing down old stuff, putting new stuff that does the same thing but looks modern, looks beautiful and shiny. You know, they're obsessed with that. So I really do appreciate this whole look.
Outremont, which contributes to the distinct feeling. Finally, physical features like the mountain, river, and canals add separation between areas too. McGill and the University of Montreal are not that far away from each other, but they feel like different worlds, in part because of the mountain and language differences separating them.
Wow.
This channel actually started in part to showcase our bike trips around Montreal. By foot or bike, we visited nearly all the boroughs and independent municipalities of Montreal.
Oh, really? Just just on your bike, you could like explore the entire city and feel like you visited like 12 different countries or something.
And most of the off-island suburbs, too. It felt like we never ran out of interesting places or things to see.
Yeah.
We're still waiting to visit the great city of Dorval Island,
Oh, wait, there's a little island?
population 30.
The place we lived most recently before Montreal was Toronto, a city that has a lot going for it, but it's also crumbling under the weight of a housing affordability crisis that made living there kind of depressing.
Huh.
This was an emergency, and it felt like easing the burden of housing should have been the number one priority of the city. But
I have a lot of trust in these guys to tell me the truth here. And they've had experience living in Toronto and Ottawa, and Montreal here. So that's actually a really important point of view to have for me to get to experience. It's very nice.
following city politics and planning, it never really felt like that.
You know, fundamentally, what we need to talk about really is what we don't talk about enough in this council is we don't talk enough about homeowners' rights. People who invest in this city and who live in stable residential neighborhoods. The people that pay the taxes in this city. And we've got to start talking more about that if we're going to move forward.
Many people did care, especially among the younger generation, but a significant portion of the population was indifferent, valuing the stability of their neighborhoods over access to housing for younger people.
I mean, this just kind of reminds me of in America right now, just an overall generational housing crisis where an entire generation or two of young people are not earning enough money, for one thing, on average, and housing prices have skyrocketed so high, although they recently are starting to crash. That's neither here nor there. But a lot of Americans who are younger are not able to purchase a house, whereas in the previous generations, every American family had the American dream, their beautiful house and fence, and now all the parents are just like, what are you doing, you bum? You don't have a house? And it's like, no, they're really expensive and really difficult to get. And there's a little similarity going on here. Not exactly the same situation, but a little similarity here.
Or they were short-sighted, caring more about sticking it to greedy developers than actually getting housing built. Or finally, many were actually excited, seeing rising housing costs not as a burden, but as an exciting investment opportunity. Jump on the profit train while you still can.
Yeah.
Montreal.
If you're in a position where you can purchase a house as an investment,
Has a reputation as a bastion of housing affordability.
Ooh.
You still can. Montreal has a reputation as a bastion of housing affordability, and while it's definitely faced
Cool.
spikes in prices over the past few years too, especially in neighborhoods like Verdun, the striking difference is that people seem to actually care more. Montrealers seem to have more of a sense of affordable housing as a positive amenity for a city.
I mean, it is extremely positive. It's wonderful. I wonder how things are so cheap. Is it literally the way that the housing is built so compactly that lets prices remain low? At any rate, it's obviously a very nice thing that housing is affordable.
They see rising prices not as an investment opportunity, but as an added stress or burden that takes away from the vibrancy of the city, pushing
Yeah.
lower income people out and making it more difficult for middle income people to relax or take career or business risks.
Yeah.
In
yeah.
the Toronto housing debate, people would often downplay the problem by explaining that you aren't entitled to a home wherever you want, you should just move. But that's not something
Ooh.
you really hear as much in Montreal. The
Oh, that's nice. I mean, that is obviously something someone could say, like, if this city is too expensive for you, get out. It's like, that's not in much of the way of kindness towards your fellow man. Not that the open market and economics and stuff is necessarily kind, but in Montreal, it's obviously proven there are steps you can take to care for your fellow man, try to make it so everyone can comfortably live and have a place to live.
different attitude towards rising prices might partially come from Montreal having more renters than Toronto, so more people experience rising prices as an added cost. But one book on Montreal housing actually identifies a deep-rooted cultural difference in Quebec, where housing is less of a speculative asset and more of a long-term stable investment.
Huh.
Parks are popular in every city due to having playground equipment for kids, sports facilities, or areas to hike. But
Oh,
living in
yeah.
Montreal, it really stood out to us how much parks were also just a gathering place for people to meet up and spend time with others.
Wow. This really builds on the community part of, like, it's a community, and I'm a sucker for a good park. I love parks. I love when they're in cities. I think they are wonderful, and Montreal loves them too. So, hey.
Which makes the city feel more vibrant and alive. Parks
Yeah.
were kind of like a shared backyard where people would have picnics, barbecues, and beer or wine, which,
Yeah.
unlike most Canadian cities, is legal in Montreal if you have a meal and is usually tolerated even if you don't have food.
Oh, a little public drinking? More legal here than other places? Yeah, and Montreal, a little bit of a party place. All right, I'm not gonna... I won't jump that far. I don't actually know. But seems like they're plenty willing to be a bit hip. Drink a little here or there. Get a little crazy, even. That's okay.
We've also encountered impromptu music events in Montreal parks. This festive use of parks isn't completely absent elsewhere. You could encounter something similar at Trinity Bellwoods in Toronto.
Cool.
But it's really common in Montreal, whether you're talking about Parc La Fontaine, Parc Jarry, or even the Lachine Canal. You have to
Wow.
wonder whether this culture of parks and public spaces is one of the reasons why Montreal is faster to move on urbanist improvements like pedestrian streets.
Wow, I love this. A community that loves bicycling and parks and being outdoors and being together. And it has a side effect of causing the city to move faster on community projects. Because the people really value that. That's fantastic. Awesome reason to live in Montreal.
It's just really normal there to make space for people.
So far, we've painted a pretty positive picture of Montreal, and
Cool.
it is a wonderful city. But we're not
Yeah.
giving the full story if we don't also talk about some of the negatives, too.
Uh-oh.
Healthcare in Montreal is Not very good.
No!
This is partly a problem with Quebec, but it's especially bad in Montreal.
Healthcare. Healthcare changes from city to city? Or region to region? There's not just like a national healthcare system in Canada? I'm a little confused on this.
Montreal is dead last among Canada's 28 metropolitan areas for access to doctors, with
Huh.
31% of people not having a family doctor.
What? Why is this? Is this just determined by, like... I had reacted to Canadian healthcare at some point earlier, and it seemed pretty darn good. But perhaps in Montreal, is there simply a shortage of doctors? And is that like one of the problems? 30% of people don't have one?
Compared to 18% in Vancouver and 9% in Toronto. That's across the whole metropolitan area, too. It seems to be worse in central Montreal because of the PREM system of region-based licensing. We signed up for a doctor waitlist in Montreal and got an expected time frame of 2 years. But
Wow.
we heard from others that it often ends up taking longer unless you have a priority health condition.
Oh my gosh. Reminds me of America. No, it's, I mean, waiting 2 years to get a family doctor is actually, that'd be a horror story in America. So that's actually quite bad. Unless you have a horrible condition. That's like how it works in America too. Well, actually, in America you can get access to a lot of the healthcare that you need. It's just that you'll be in massive crippling debt for the rest of your life. So that's the major problem here. Different than Montreal. Montreal simply isn't... You may be able to afford it, but you can't get access to it. There's no one there to treat you. You gotta wait on a waiting list. That's a different problem.
From the perspective of an Anglophone coming from outside of Quebec, Montreal's language being French is both an exciting language learning opportunity and a major challenge for employment. People often treat learning French as something you either choose to do or not do, but more realistic is making solid progress, but still not being as strong or fast in the language as someone who grew up in Quebec. Not even actual francophones, but other anglophones or allophones, who at least got more real-life practice and exposure to French from an early age.
You know, I had not considered this, but it makes complete sense, especially after learning that the primary language in Montreal is French. That it's like if I were trying to live and work in another country, a foreign country that does not speak English, I would expect I need to accommodate them. I have to learn their language. I'm not going to they probably will know English, thankfully. I'm lucky that a lot of nations know English, but I don't want to force them to bail me out, that I don't have to rely on them. I would like to learn the language of where I moved to. So I get it. I get why learning French is much more important than I kind of realized in Montreal for jobs and stuff.
This doesn't mean you can't succeed. Someone in my French class from Brazil started with a little French, worked his way up through all the levels, passed the provincial French exam, and became a teacher. Many other people in the class had jobs in tech, where language requirements aren't as strict. But it was hard not to notice that a big portion of the class had a hard time finding a job, even after working through all the levels and taking intensive French, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, for a year or more. To be clear, it's understandable that employers in Montreal might prefer the candidate who speaks better French.
Wow, so there's a little bit of bias going on, which would happen anywhere, where if they can tell you're not a native French speaker, your French is just okay, they're probably going to be biased and select the person who is a native French speaker if they identify that. So yeah, I could easily see where that would happen.
But it's still a challenge and a barrier for people who didn't grow up there.
Yeah.
Montreal is a noticeably less tidy and orderly city compared to other places we've lived. And often this is a mix of good and bad. A culture of street art and murals adds a lot of color and visual interest to the streets.
Oh, I love that. Even the graffiti. It's still, I wouldn't like it if my business was graffitied and ruined with paint, but you have to love a good mural, and you kind of think graffiti is sometimes entertaining, except when it's you who's being graffitied.
A culture of street art and murals adds a lot of color and visual interest to the streets. But
That's
at
cool.
the same time, there's a lot of low-effort tagging that's basically equivalent to littering. especially when it's painted on signs or over more effortful art.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of garbage, Montreal's flex housing typically has 2 to 6 units per building, which is dense enough to produce a lot of garbage, but not enough, at least at the time that they were built, to have a centralized garbage room like a bigger apartment building would. As a result, garbage day each week means lots of bags of garbage on the sidewalk, which sometimes get ripped open by squirrels. Using bins instead of...
Oh, that's a whole other problem. Americans usually... Squirrels don't do that. Usually raccoons do that. Famously in America, raccoons going through your trash. It's also kind of funny, though.
garbage on the sidewalk, which sometimes get ripped open by squirrels. Using bins instead of bags would be better, but at least in the neighborhood we lived in, those were mostly reserved for alleys, maybe because of space. The park culture that we mentioned can also result in lots of garbage left in the park the day after celebratory summer nights.
Oh, well, yeah, that could happen anywhere, though. After a big gathering, everyone's throwing stuff everywhere, not picking it up, yeah.
Montreal does a pretty good job of making the best of winter, with outdoor activities like skating and skiing. But there's no getting around the fact that winter kinda sucks. There's a reason Canadians like to go to places like Florida and Cuba during the cold months.
Wait, Canadians like to vacation during winter? That makes sense, honestly. Americans would think it's so different and fun at first, but then, like, say, I'm out of here. I'm going somewhere warm.
There's a reason Canadians like to go to places like Florida and Cuba during the cold months.
Okay.
Montreal doesn't have quite the worst winters in Canada, but it is noticeably colder and snowier than Toronto, Calgary, and obviously Vancouver.
Okay.
If you're coming from an even warmer climate in the US or Europe, where snow and ice are the exception rather than the rule in winter, you might be in for an unpleasant surprise.
Yeah, like I was saying, Americans would be like, since it so rarely is bad winter and snow and ice, Americans would be like, oh, this is so different and fun, playing in the snow, and Canadians would just be like, just wait, buddy, you'll be over it real quick, and Americans will be like, what? No, so fun.
With that said, it does probably make you appreciate the summer even more.
Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to reminisce about Montreal and subscribe.
Wow. It is the end of that video. That was by the Urbanity. Nice name. I give that a like. I did like that very much. That was fascinating. A very, very good introduction, and honestly got kind of specific at times about Montreal. I thought it might be just an overview, fun little overview of the best and some bad things about Montreal, but it really got quite specific, which was very nice, and it was a very unique point of view, comparing it to other cities in Canada, which is a very realistic way to analyze it. If you really want to live there, that's kind of the decision-making process that you're going through, so I actually really appreciated that. Just taking a look at some of the things that were talked about. The neighborhoods are cool, how diverse and different they are, so cool, and how you can bicycle around, go to the parks. It's a community events and budgeting for things. It happens quicker. It's really cool. The parks, and then some of the bad things like employment can be difficult. There can be trash issues, winter issues. Okay, it still sounds like an incredibly fun and interesting place to live. I think maybe the biggest hesitation for me would only be the language barrier, because I know myself, and I know it would be difficult for me to commit to learning French, an entire language. If I could learn a whole language, and I had the motivation and intelligence, I would have done it by now. So I kind of think it's not in the cards for me. So I would really struggle. Otherwise, it's obviously a wonderful place in Canada. And I'm glad I can kind of put a picture in my mind to it now. Whereas before, I just had no idea what it looked like or what was going on when people talked about Montreal, even though I know of this place in Canada. I'm glad I've rectified that. I enjoyed that. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like or leave a comment. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada, Canadian culture, places, stuff I have never seen ever. Feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thank you for watching, and see you next time.